With this video, I want to immediately address something that people might find off-putting about this series. The style of the designs. The fact that these are 2D designs and not 3D isn't really important. A lot of people do RWBY OCs and additional fan art in 2D anyway, and RWBY has to be done in 2D before it can be modeled in 3D. So that's not really the problem here. It's the fact that it's Derek J. Wyatt's style. It's the style Omniverse was done in. The aliens still feel like they are very much in the realm of Ben 10 to some people. That's fair. I can't really argue with that. There's an inherent disconnect. But I personally don't really mind. If that's not really like your thing and the edits feel off because of the style, but you still have an interest in like the lore and the reasons behind the designs, that's fine. Whatever. None of these designs are final anyway. So I'll want to revisit them at some point, and if I ever learn how to properly draw people instead of just using the character models from the show, that'll definitely help. But that is a ways away. So for now, we're still here. There is also the possibility of one day commissioning artists to redraw whatever design I think worked best, just to fit more for RWBY, you know? Anyway, hi. We're back for a second part of this series. I had a lot of fun doing the first part, which is why this is happening so soon after the first part. Even with like the technical difficulties I was having in post-production with that video, and there were a lot. But anyway, I want to keep going with this because it's super fun to come up with the lore, and doing the edits is also really fun. In fact, 2 of the designs in this video were done the very day that video went out, because I was just that excited to start doing more ideas. Now, before we begin, I do want to talk about something else, which is that I had sort of a fun challenge idea that could be done with this series. So I already said that there will be a fun challenge in seeing if anyone can guess which character models I used for each alien. And I'm not going to say what they are until someone guesses them correctly, if anybody guesses them at all. So there's the challenge from the first video. But this time, it occurred to me that I'm doing these in batches of 4. RWBY already has a theme of 4 anyway. So, my challenge to you is to try to come up with a team name for each video's batch of aliens. Good luck, because I am not going to be making the batches with that challenge in mind. I will not be intentionally making it so that a name can be made. You'll have to do that part on your own if you decide to. But I guess as an example, last time, the aliens that I did then could be referred to as Team Dread, bringing to mind things like blacks and reds, you know? It's just another fun engagement thing this series could have. All that out of the way, let's get started with this video's batch, shall we?
I mentioned the Andromedas as a favorite group of mine for the Ben 10 franchise last time, and I really wish I could say the same for the Honor aliens. They're very fun concepts, and Snarrow is even in my top 10, but they aren't all as consistently high in my book as the Andromedas are. And it doesn't help that the Galactic Monster story arc was beyond subpar. That's not going to stop me from making a Remnant version of one of them I'm not as much of a fan of. Oh, no. We're actually going to be doing 2 Honor aliens in this episode. And the first one is already on his way to being human as is. Frankenstrike. Say hello to Frank N. Strike. Okay, I'll admit it. I cheesed this name like hell. Can you blame me? It's the easiest to do it with. I'm not entirely sure what the N stands for, though. In fact, I don't even know of any instances of middle names on Remnant to begin with. Anywho, Frank's semblance is Victorious Lightning, the name of which is a nod to both Dr. Victor, the Transillian scientist who worked for Ziskare, and Frankenstrike's original placeholder name, Ben Victor. Victorious Lightning allows Frank to discharge electricity from his body, rather than being empowered by it like Nora. However, he was born with it unlocked, and thusly couldn't control it as a kid, which led to the unfortunate nature of his body. Terminal Skeleton is the name of the series of mechanical bolts that have been surgically implanted into his body, creating the scars that have yet to heal even after all this time. This wasn't done out of malice or sadism or anything like that. No one was happy about what they were doing. They just had to do something to dampen his powers, and this was all they could do. Upon deciding he wanted to train himself and hone his semblance, he donned a harness housing the Transformer towers on his shoulders. Frank's design primarily takes from his original series and Young Omniverse designs, wearing pants and gauntlets similar to the aspects on those designs. The boots are also inspired by his Omniverse designs, with the bands on his legs like those of Lightning Bolt, his Ben 23 counterpart, which Frank also has a color variation based on that. The bright purpley pink coloration comes from the color associated with the honor system, especially in way of the purple lightning that Victor used to orchestrate Zescare's plans during the original series. Most of his scars aren't actually in line with those of the actual design. They mainly needed to be in line with the bolts instead. But the one going across his right pectoral is a nod to his teenage Omniverse design, which has that scar around the Omnitrix. And he has the scar across his eyes seen on Lightning Bolt. And, speaking of scars, yes, those are top scars. Frank's origin does have a lot more concrete moments in its story than I've done previously, in way of the semblance unlocking and weapon integration, and even touching a bit on his gender identity journey. But beyond that, the room for headcanons is still open. Personally, I don't imagine that Frank is from Atlas. Or if he is from that area, he's probably from Mantle instead. Or maybe one of the outer settlements, like Essen or Dormir. The main reason is because if he was from Atlas, he would have had a much better solution given to the semblance issue. Wherever he's from had the ability to perform a specific procedure, but not the resources to make any better choice. As much as I want to emphasize nobody did this with a smile, I think Frank might hold some resentment even if he understands the reasoning. And that's to tie into Frankenstrike's own origins with Frankenstein's monster. The monster, also known as Prometheus or Adam, despised Victor Frankenstein for creating him, and the appearance that made people hate him. It led the monster on a vengeful journey, psychologically torturing Victor until his eventual death. At least as a very, very, very simplified summary of that story. I don't see Frank being an evil or malevolent person, or even really spiteful, but I do see him being angry at the people who raised him because of the pain this has put him through. Frank is a diminutive of Francis, which finds its origins meaning Frenchman. Anyone who had migrated from France or their descendants to England were referred to as such. So I guess France's flag colors could fit. Maybe throw in some black for mimes or brown for baguettes. And strike, in this context, refers to a lightning strike, with Frank specifically being that iconic pinkish purple. As for the N, I don't know, make something up. Maybe necrosis, since Frank is based on an undead stitched-together being. Say it brings to mind the blues of undead bodies or the beige of bones. I don't know, I wasn't thinking about it too much. I just wanted the funny pun name. From one alien I don't really care for right into another. I've never really been a fan of Atomix. The design has always been mid to me, and the personality is kind of insufferable, or at the very least annoying. I'm also still confused on how Vilgax and Malware Armor defeated him. That still doesn't make sense. But between Atomix being an alien I got requested to do for part 2, and also wanting to gauge how I handle the more powerful aliens, I decided to do it. Say hello to Atom Mint. Atom's semblance is Nuclear Winter, taking its name from the Atomix move, which is a play on Nuclear Winter and Winter. Nuclear Winter allows Atom to ionize the atoms around him to irradiate them. It's a dangerous ability, but he's learned to focus it with the use of his mechanical arms, Blight of Hands, which is a play on Blight, both just the actual word as well as the DC villain, which many fan-made Atomix designs and redesigns have tried to emulate, and Sleight of Hand. They're not prosthetics, mind you, they're just things he wears. The arms are obviously elongated versions of Atomix's actual arms, with some other adjusted proportions as well. The majority of Atom's outfit takes the color of the retroactively made negative Atomix, while he wears boots, a neck brace, a belt, and knee pads inspired by those of regular Atomix. His hair is spiked up to emulate a similar shape to Atomix's cone head, and he wears earrings that look similar to the little spikes on the sides of Atomix's head. The Omnitrix emblem on his belt is the real one like what you see all the others wear, and the one on his chest is just a stylistic choice, based on the one Atomix has on his chest, and I decided it'd be fun for the shoulder bulbs to have that too. I considered Vacuo for Atom, but I think I'm going to go with Atlas, and I'll leave Vacuo for an eventual energy. I think it makes more sense that way. Atomix is some sophisticated robot, while Energy is stuck inside a rustic containment suit. And I do think Atlas would take heavy interest in nuclear technology if it ever came about on Remnant. Or, more specifically, they would take interest in weaponizing it. Atom is a walking reactor. Of course they'd commission weapons to help focus his semblance. He's probably just as bombastic as Atomix is, which means that he's just as dangerous too. All that power in a relatively chaotic package is a recipe for disaster. Obviously, Atom has some color association, considering a canon character is named Atom already. In Hebrew, Atom means man, and Adam means red. While nothing on this Atom is red, I guess there's a stretch that the gray comes from Albedo's Atomix, which has red, and mint is a teal color. Also, saying his name in full sounds like the word adamant, which I just thought was a fun play on words. Some things start out big, and some things start out small. Very small. But sometimes the smallest thing can make the biggest changes of all. Nanomech felt like a very fun alien to make a Remnant counterpart for. I mentioned earlier that Frankenstrike is on his way to being human, which, sure, yes, but Nanomech is literally half human. Like, that's his whole thing, is that the nanochips are able to be scanned in, but aren't 100% compatible, so it had to hybridize the DNA sample with Ben's to make Nanomech work. Keep that in mind as I introduce you to Nancy Mackenzie. Nancy is a fly faunus, a trait inherited by her mother. This is of course a nod to the Queen, either Elena Validus or the Decoy Queen, being the ones to have created all of the nanochips. As such, Nanomech's nanochip DNA comes from the maternal side, and it helps with making Nancy allude to Nanomech's hybrid nature, her having a faunus mother and a human father. The human father aspect could also tie into Victor Validus, who the Queen used as a host in order to create the nanochips. Nancy's semblance is nano size, a fun little reverse of jumbo size. It's pretty straightforward. It allows Nancy to shrink herself, or others if she extends her aura onto them. Her weapon is Tech Head, because she herself is a tech head, someone fascinated by technology. It's a super advanced helmet that helps her scan, examine, and alter technology, which is especially helpful when she's shrunk down to size to work on it from the inside. It's designed after Nanomech's head, taking the colors of his animated designs and applying them to something reminiscent of his alien swarm design. I had been hesitant at first, thinking maybe the design was a bit too out there, but honestly, not really. If anything, it could do with having more detail, like Maria's cybernetic ocular implants. The rest of her outfit is meant to emulate Nanomech's Omniverse design specifically. Her wings point downwards, not just because a humanoid flies would, but also as a nod to Nanomech's ultimate alien design, where they point downward. Definitely an Atlesian. If not a scientist, then surely a mechanic, but probably both. I could easily see her as being some sort of protege to Pietro. Maybe she's working on some form of nanotechnology that operates like the chips do, and so she herself is effectively acting as the Queen. I don't really have an idea for what she looks like under the helmet. If anyone wants to make any interpretations, I think my only requirement is she needs to have green hair, as in most circumstances, faunus traits are the color of the person's hair, and her wings are green. I would also say maybe green eyes, but I'm more flexible on that. Nancy comes from Anne, which comes from the Hebrew Hannah meaning grace, and the French belle meaning beautiful. Those are a bit more subjective in regards to color associations, though I think grace is associated with gold personally. Mackenzie derives from the Gaelic name Macoinic, which means comely or attractive, which, again, subjective on the color thing. However, it could also mean child of the wise leader or born of fire. And while the first one is not so color-oriented, fire definitely brings to mind colors of red, orange, and yellow, among others. Time to circle back around to that second honor alien I mentioned we'd be doing. Ghostfreak. Arguably the most powerful of the original 10, Ghostfreak is a very interesting alien with very confusing lore that's not very consistent and is included in the most canon-breaking episode of the original continuity, which makes it even more messy. But that means we can try to make something just as interesting with his remnant counterpart. Something ideally less convoluted. Say hello to Goddard Freeman. I fear I may have peaked too soon. This is already far and away my favorite edit I've done for this series. There are a ton of layers to it, to the point I didn't even realize how many I was throwing in as I was making it. Goddard's purple hoodie is a nod to Zscair, especially his Omniverse design, which gives him a hood and the chest eye design. His pants are a reference to the black and white coloration of Ghostfreak's tentacles, and his eye patch is a nod to Ghostfreak having only one eye. The shackles on his outfit and the chains holding Zoetic's scythe are a nod to Ghostfreak's Omniverse design. I should note, however, that the gray coloration specifically nods to a comic that debuted Ghostfreak in Omniverse before he actually appeared in the show proper, depicting his chains as gray instead of green, and also gave him a mouth and what probably was a second eye. It was weird. The chain links on the Omnitrix are cool, though. Anyway, I made his face be a bit more skeletal to reference the Scare's own skull head, though it's right side up here since he's just a dude. I guess that makes it an Omniverse reference because Derek said he didn't get why the head was upside down, which never really made sense. He's a ghost alien, the upside down skull was creepy, it's pretty simple. Right side up is boring, but at least here it's necessary. Goddard's weapon is Zoetic's scythe, which has hard light dust embedded into its blade. It's kind of weird to me that hard light dust is pretty much exclusively used as a defensive dust outside of Velvet's and Isidora constructs. I want to see it be used more often offensively. I've for a while now been a fan of the idea of Jean combining Crookie and Morse's Mistral and Atlas upgrades, by using the broadsword sheath mode in tandem with the hard light extensions to form a sort of lightsaber. Anyway, why Goddard has hard light is a nod to Zascare's ectoplasm beams, which are depicted as being quite bright. And I couldn't really think of any other dust type that could really work. Maybe lightning dust, but I'm hesitant to say that. Maybe gravity dust, because it fits with the purple vibe, and Ghostfreak and Zascare do have a form of telekinesis. I didn't want to do a scythe with gravity because it would have overlapped with Maria's life and death weapon. It's a scythe because Zascare has a scythe in Omniverse. He's very Grim Reaper inspired, which is why Goddard has overlap with Maria in every other capacity. Again, why I didn't do gravity dust. The fact both have some eye injury and visual impairment is a bit more coincidental though. As for the name, Zoetic refers to things that are living, a sense of life and vitality. It's an intentionally ironic name given the character. Also, it gives the weapon the initials ZS, like Zascare. Goddard's semblance is Phantom Limb. A phantom limb is a phenomenon in which one's brain still fills a body part that is no longer there. In this case, the phantom part is a pun because he's a ghost. Based on a ghost. It allows him to become partially intangible. That's why the name specifies limb. It takes more energy and focus for his entire body to do it all at once, which risks his aura running out faster. His art depicts him using his semblance on his left leg, which is meant to be a visual nod to how Ghostfreak only has a tail and not legs. So he basically only has one lower limb with it active. Do let me know if calling it Phantom Limb might come across as a bit insensitive. I'm a tad hesitant to use it, but I'll have it as a placeholder for the time being. Normally, I do the lore and then the name etymology, but I want to use the lore as a segue into the next section, so we're going to do the name first. Goddard is of Norman origin, deriving from Golhard, which means keeper of goats. Shepherds have staves, this guy has a scythe. The Grim Reaper shepherds people to the afterlife. And goat and ghost aren't too dissimilar sounding, especially if it's plural goats. Anyway, goats come in many colors, grays, browns, blacks, whites, or you could associate it with the green fields that shepherds have them in. I'd probably go for the monochrome ones though if you want to tie the color into our character. Freeman is pretty much exactly what it says on the tin. A freeborn man. It also found a lot of use by African Americans upon being freed from slavery. Maybe it could be associated with the gray of the shackles that are being broken. Shackles like those worn by Goddard and his inspirations. It's a nod to Zascare wanting out of the Omnitrix, wanting to be free of Ben's control. Though he did intend on controlling Ben instead after, and everyone else. Now, hopefully, you've noticed something about Goddard that sets him apart from the others. There is no Omnitrix emblem anywhere. This isn't the only time this will happen, mind you. Slapback and Grey Matter both wear the Omnitrix on their backs, so likely they won't have visible ones either, but it's different here. It's not just that it isn't visible, it just isn't there. Whatever this Omnitrix wearing organization is, Goddard isn't a part of it. Or rather, he isn't anymore. Enter the Plumbers. Oh yes, it's time for some lore. This time it's a bit more concrete. I still want most of the individual characters to be vague enough to explore other people's headcanons and interpretations, but it'll be a lot easier to decide how you want to make those interpretations if you have a foundation to work with. The Plumbers in the original Ben 10 canon are an intergalactic law enforcement agency, and during the UAF era they adopted the Omnitrix Hourglass as their emblem. People have argued against this idea for a while, but I think it makes sense. While I definitely think the Plumbers have a corruption problem, and the show very much ignores it and acts like the Plumbers are just correct all the time, I do think it makes some amount of sense a law enforcement agency would take what is meant to be a peace symbol. And that's what Azimuth wanted the Omnitrix to be, after all, a device for peace. So the Plumbers are a thing here. More than likely the organization is of Atlas origins. It's a massive law enforcement agency trying to be involved in governing everything, and Atlas has been doing that since the days leading up to the Great War, even if more recent stuff is a bit more subtle about it.
But everything will fall apart. RWBY will be everywhere. You're right. But Atlas is willing and prepared to assist.
Thank you, my dear, you've proven my point exactly. So, throughout the years, at varying points in time, Remnant's Plumbers recruited all of these individuals resembling the Ben 10 transformations. I think that gives a good basis for why they all share the Omnitrix symbol, so feel free to go crazy with ideas spawning off that. But what does this have to do with Goddard? Why doesn't he wear this symbol? Because much like Ziskare, he got out. I'll try to come up with something a bit more concrete whenever we get around to Wildvine, but basically whoever the Wildvine is of this series, that's the one who got Goddard into the Plumbers, potentially without him really wanting to. This is a nod to how Ziskare was trapped in the Omnitrix when DNA was sampled for the Florana, Wildvine species. It happened to be one Ziskare was possessing at the time, resulting in his entire being becoming sampled and pulled into the device, which is also just a byproduct of how ectoneurite consciousness exists even within the smallest strand of DNA. I don't think Goddard came from Atlas. In fact, I was considering trying to tie his origins into Mountain Glen somehow, or at least have a big chunk of his story be tied to it in some way. But being part of an Atlesian organization would definitely help tremendously with keeping stock of Hardlight dust for Zoetic's scythe. In any case, something eventually changed. Maybe he realized the organization was corrupt, or some misfortune on a mission forced him down a dark path. Either way, Goddard left the Plumbers. He no longer wears their badge of honor. Why? Well, I leave that to you. Like I said, these things are meant to be vague enough for people to come up with their own stories, but have enough set-in-stone details to leap off of. Maybe there's a story to be had where Goddard recruits all of the other Honor alien characters such as Frank as a parallel to Ziskare's rule over them. And maybe you liked this video. As far as content goes on my channel, the first video is doing really well, so thanks for the reception on that. Hopefully this one does just as well, if not better. Do you have any aliens you want to see for part 3? Any story ideas that these guys could be a part of? Let me know. So until next time, do all that YouTube algorithm stuff, liking, commenting, subscribing, and I will see you when I see you.
If I bleed tonight, if I am sad